Today, the core of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan is on the path to defeat. Their remaining operatives spend more time thinking about their own safety than plotting against us. They did not direct the attacks in Benghazi or Boston, and that means we'll face more localized threats like what we saw in Benghazi, or the BP oil facility in Algeria, in which local operatives, perhaps in loose affiliation with regional networks, launch periodic attacks against Western diplomats, companies, and other soft targets, or resort to kidnapping and other criminal enterprises to fund their operations. So that's the current threat. Lethal, yet less capable, al-Qaeda affiliates. Threats to diplomatic facilities and businesses abroad. Homegrown extremists. This is the future of terrorism.
That was the president back in May saying the core of al-Qaeda was crumbling, and yet less than 2 months later, an unprecedented closing of our embassies across the world because of a dangerous security threat that lawmakers say is reminiscent of what we saw and what we heard before 9/11. It's a direct contradiction to the recent White House narrative that you just listened to, and it's raising some new questions about how safe we really are. Bret Stephens is foreign affairs columnist for the Wall Street Journal, also a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist. I have to mention that, Bret. When you win that award, I got to bring it up. The president says al-Qaeda is lethal, but less capable. But then we had this unprecedented closing. What do you make of it?
Right. I mean, what you just heard, the clip you just replayed from his speech in May, is a little bit like the George W. Bush mission accomplished speech. What he was saying was, we killed bin Laden, we got the core of al-Qaeda, and so therefore we don't really have to worry about these groups like al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula, al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. They'll do the kind of small-scale terrorism that you saw at Benghazi or the BP oil facility. I think the president fundamentally misunderstands what al-Qaeda is about. He's thinking of it like an organization like General Motors with a headquarters that runs things. It's like Burger King. It's a franchise, and these franchises are effectively identical in their ambitions and increasingly in their capabilities.
Where do you think that misunderstanding comes from?
Well, look, I don't know. I think there's a real problem in this administration in getting to grips with what al-Qaeda is fundamentally about. You know, the president kept insisting that by killing bin Laden, he had somehow, it was like getting Hitler, that it had somehow taken the heart out of the organization. And, you know, you saw years of resistance, Jenna. Remember in 2006, 2007, when the Bush administration was warning about al-Qaeda in Iraq, al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia, a lot of people said, well, that's not the real al-Qaeda. Well, al-Qaeda is simply an idea. Al-Qaeda is a model. And that model is being copied around the region. And these groups in Yemen, in northern Africa, increasingly again in Iraq, are proving to be just as deadly and just as capable as the original al-Qaeda was.
In your column this week, you said if there's a silver lining, it's that the administration can put an end to the end of the war on terror without much fear of embarrassment.
Well, look, I hope that the president reels back, if not openly, in his actions, this idea that basically we've kind of beaten al-Qaeda and we can put the war on terror behind us. He even had words to the effect that we shouldn't be talking about a global war on terror. The worst thing that we can do, Jenna, is return to a pre-9/11 mentality that treated terrorism as a nuisance threat and not a strategic threat with potentially deadly ramifications in our homeland.
Some are suggesting, though, that we're making too big of a deal of this recent terror threat with an overreaction with the closing of the embassies. In fact, in the Wall Street Journal today, there's a column written by Ted Koppel, the title of which, let me just grab it because it sums it up, America's Chronic Overreaction to Terrorism. And in it he writes this: we have created an economy of fear, an industry of fear, a national psychology of fear. Al-Qaeda could never have achieved that on its own. We have inflicted it on ourselves. Over the coming years, many more Americans will die in car crashes, of gunshot wounds inflicted by family members, and by falling off ladders than from any attack by al-Qaeda. And his point, as he sums up, others that suggest the same, is that by making a bigger deal about it, by this overreaction, we're empowering our enemies. And in that case, some could argue that the president is doing the right thing, not reacting too much, saying that the war on terror is over, not giving them too much credit.
Look, I respect Mr. Koppel, and we were happy to have his piece in our pages. I take a different view. You know, that was precisely the view we took in the 1990s when we believed that responding to outrages like the attack on the USS Cole or the attack on our embassies in Kenya and Tanzania should be dealt with in a proportional way or proportionate way. The result is it encouraged al-Qaeda to strike at our homeland, and 9/11 really was a big deal. If you were in lower Manhattan, or if you were by the Pentagon, that was a huge deal. It cost our economy tens of billions of dollars, and that was a foretaste of what a terrorist might do if they had a nuclear weapon. So to say that we should not overreact, I think, is a mistake. We have to take it very seriously.
We see this, too, though, in Republican lawmakers as well. And in your column, you say, you know, after 11 years of taking off our shoes before we're getting on planes, in some cases, there is a forgetfulness about what it was like before 9/11 and immediately after. How do we make sure that that doesn't happen so we remain vigilant?
Well, you know, this is really the challenge of statecraft. It's for people like President Obama to say, no, the threat of terrorism is very serious. It's not a receding threat, because naturally when you go through endless orange alerts and all the rest of it, you kind of get used to it, and memories of 9/11 inevitably fade. The interns who are coming to us now this year were children when 9/11 happened. Let's hope that we don't have to relearn the lessons of 9/11 by experiencing a second 9/11.